you're listening to My Alien Life.
So those kind of speeds exist in our galaxy, and this object came from outside of our solar system. Having a large relative velocity, remember objects in the galaxy are moving with relative velocities on average of between 200 and 300 kilometers per second, which is much, much faster than any object in our solar system. So any random object that wasn't part of our solar system happened to be traveling in the direction of our solar system, it could easily traverse our solar system with a speed that's incredibly large.
It had been tested on lab mice, and it didn't kill them, and so I wasn't really that leery about it.
I can see there's a fear on his face. He took off, we took off, so something was wrong there, man. Something was wrong there, man. They cut into something that they didn't know. They didn't know what was wrong there, man. And there was some problems.
My Alien Life is recorded high atop the Northern Rocky Mountains and is heard all over the world, and you can listen everywhere fine podcasts are found. My website is www.myalienlifepodcast.com. There you'll find links to every episode, stories, photos, the My Alien Life Legends page, and much more. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and consider becoming a patron while you're checking out all the content. I'm your host, Cameron Logan. This is My Alien Life, and the podcast starts right now.
My Alien Life Podcast.
Three, two, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Well, Mark Turner, thank you for joining me, and welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here, Cam.
You know, I wanted to do another show on remote viewing, and it's been a while. I've kind of dedicated part of my website to that. It's interesting to me because it's not a topic that everybody knows a lot about. There's a lot of people who know a little bit about it. When did you first hear about remote viewing, and what was your initial impression? Where did you hear about it?
You make a very good point. I first heard about remote viewing probably where a lot of the early people did, I guess, on the Art Bell radio show, which of course went coast to coast, and always had some very interesting topics, as you may know. But he often had this one remote viewer from the Army group, Ed Dames, on the show, and Ed was always predicting these doom and gloom scenarios, and asteroids are going to kill us. It's the kill shot and all this. And every claim he made was kind of over the top, like one beyond the other. And so for a while there, I was like, yeah, okay, this is entertaining, but I don't know if I really trust any of it, But then, the tables turned a bit. There was a show where Art had on some of the other remote viewers from the unit. And when I heard them talk, and they were really downplaying all the crazy things that Ed Dames was saying, I thought, well, this is, maybe there is something to this. And then I learned that one of those people, Joe McMoneagle, had earned the Legion of Merit from the Army, which they don't give away like candy, right? So if they felt comfortable enough to give Joe McMoneagle a Legion of Merit, then there's obviously something to it. And then, I started reading some books, and then I learned a little bit about the program and met some of these people, and I thought, okay, well, there really is something to this.
So you thought there was something to this, but I mean, did you initially think, hey, I'm going to jump on board and I'm going to do this as well? Or did you research it? How much did you look into it before you actually started to participate, rather?
Okay, well, this was like a mid to late 90s, and there weren't a lot of opportunities to really learn remote viewing at that point. The former members of the Stargate program hadn't really set up any kind of training at that point. And so initially the way you learned it was sort of a DIY approach where you would go to certain internet forums, you would, interact with other people that were learning it. Eventually, some of the materials filtered out of the Army unit program and got posted online. And so there was a internet forum community and a mailing list, I guess, that got started and started talking about this thing. So that was basically how you learned how to do it. Now, when classes and training actually formally did take place, some of the prices, were a little bit more than the hobbyist level could afford, right?
Sure.
And I don't really blame people for doing that, but I also didn't really quite know who I would trust in that regard. So I kind of put off taking like real training for a while until I had an opportunity to take a workshop from Joe McMoneagle, and I had realized that I could trust him just based on what I'd heard from him on the radio. And so I figured if he was offering to train people, that I would learn how to do it.
So what that leaping point look like? I mean, what was your initial investment, if you don't mind me asking, and how deep did you go initially?
Well, at that point, Joe didn't really do any formal training. He didn't call it training. It was just really a workshop. But I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is just down the road from Durham. And the Rhine Research Center has been a leader in parapsychology research for over 70 years. And Joe happened to be on the board there, and he offered this weekend remote viewing workshop. And this was mid 2000, like 2005, 2000, I think it was 2006 that I actually attended this. So it was a 3-day workshop. He gave a lecture on Friday night, and then Saturday and Sunday, about 35 of us or so were crammed into the Rhine's classroom for those 2 days. And he basically just gave us some targets and said, okay, here's kind of what you do, and then you do it. And then that was really, I have to say, life is made full of lots of little moments and stuff. But that particular weekend was a huge turning point for me, just changing my worldview forever, to be honest with you. When you first do remote viewing, very first time, and you realize that you know things that you didn't see or feel or hear or touch, it really changes your whole outlook on the universe and how you fit in. It was honestly mind-blowing, and there's no other way I can put it.
I can't even imagine. But, one of the questions that I always have, and I've talked to several people who do what you do, it's when he initially explained the process to you, is there ever an explanation of how it actually happens? Meaning, I know where I'm going with this, but, does he say, well, your brain is plugged into this network of infinite number of fibers that run through the universe or whatever? I mean, is there an initial explanation of how they think this works?
It's a theory called PFM, I think is how they put it.
Right.
Sorry, that's a joke. No, honestly, after all the research has been done, nobody honestly knows the science behind it. It just works. They know that it does work, and it can be replicated every time. And in the test that Dr. Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ had conducted on people that walked into the lab at Stanford Research Institute while they were developing this with Ingo Swann, they found that just about anybody off the street had at least some talent.
Right.
And in a way, that's almost like saying, I can play tennis and Serena Williams can also play tennis. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of a variability between the ability, and so anybody can actually do this. And I honestly forgot where we were going with this whole. Well,
how the actual mechanism that makes this work, and
okay.
What do we understand of it?
Okay, well, I'll give you a theory that I sort of came upon, and I was listening to another remote viewer on an earlier podcast today, my friend Daz Smith, who's talking about another question, and I don't know if he put it in quite these terms, but it's something I thought of a couple of months ago. I think that when, like the example I like to give, first off, I facilitate the Rhine's remote viewing group every month. We meet on a third Wednesday of the month, and we do a couple of remote viewing targets. We talk about remote viewing. I don't actually train people, but I just facilitate some practice, right? I give people some practice targets and we talk about it. So I was thinking, as I was working with remote viewing, I thought, okay, how is it that various people can look at different events using remote viewing and they get different results? And so one idea I thought was, well, think about the Eiffel Tower. What is the first thing that had to be done to build the Eiffel Tower?
I would imagine the ground would have had to be reinforced. It's a huge, huge object. I mean, one of the things.
So some people say it's the ground. I've heard people say, well, they had to get a construction permit or something, which is,
right.
I don't know what Paris was like back in those days. But actually, the first thing that had to happen before the Eiffel Tower was built is that it had to begin as an idea. Somebody had to think of it. Somebody had to say, wouldn't it be great if we built this thing, right?
Right.
So the Eiffel Tower began as an idea. So the next question I asked the remote viewing folks is, at what point did the Eiffel Tower stop being an idea?
Still an idea. Still strong.
It is still an idea, right? The people who built it had an idea what the Eiffel Tower should look like. The people who saw it once it was built all had different ideas. Everybody that thinks about the Eiffel Tower has a different idea of the Eiffel Tower.
Right.
And all this stuff sort of builds up. And I decided that when you remote view something, you're not actually remote viewing something physical. You're remote viewing really the idea of it. And some people might call this the Akashic records, if you've heard that mentioned before. It's like the pure form. It's the thought. It's the idea. It's the consciousness, I guess, of whatever it is that you're trying to look for. And I think that remote viewing gives you a view or a perception of that isn't filtered through our normal five senses. Mm-hmm. So you're seeing the real thing. And then the real challenge, I guess, in learning remote viewing is figuring out how to fill in those blanks of the framework that comes through the idea, right? So this is getting like really deep, I know, but some mystics say that the three-dimensional world that we live in is just camouflage, right? Everything is fake in physical world, and it all is really at the basis of it an idea. And I think that remote viewing is just being able to perceive that pure idea and not like the three-dimensional camouflage that we're used to dealing with every day. Does that make sense, or am I just like going way off the deep end?
Well, I mean, we could go any number of ways with this, and to me, I wonder. I always have this. I don't even know what to call it. Some sort of instinctual behavior that I have that kind of plays in the background, much like like a Mac computer, like the OS operating system. Not that I'm a computer, but it's always going on in the background. So, I get initial information about my surroundings and maybe even deeper than that from time to time. And sometimes I'm actually able to tune to that. And it could be, who knows what that really is. But I think everybody has some sort of sense about them that they can perceive things that can't be seen, heard, tasted, smelled, whatever. So there's that, but there's also there's this harmonic balance in the universe that basically I do believe connects every person and everything. So I think that it's part that as well, and above and beyond that, who knows? But what I would like to know though is what your thoughts are. Prior to the military jumping on board and running with this, like they often do when it means power, means getting an advantage over an adversary. I mean, they're gonna obviously act, but they got information initially on this. I mean, how far do we go back? I mean, how far has this been used, and what did it look like possibly 1,000 years ago? Maybe, I don't know.
The French consciousness explorer René Worcalier was one of the first to write about what we consider remote viewing now. And a lot of the work that Ingo Swann and Puthoff and Targ and others basically created after that was all built on his work. So there's also a great book by Upton Sinclair, right? The muckraking novelist called Mental Radio. Have you heard of this? Mm-hmm. This was a book that he wrote, and he and his wife had done essentially remote viewing experiments. She would be in one room of their house and he would be in the other. And one of them would be looking at a photograph, and the other would be able to sketch that photograph, being in a completely separate room. So, people have looked at this and realized that there is something to this, and of course, like the anecdotes of things happening, like an intuition or a gut feeling coming true, or precognitive dream and stuff like that. I mean, that goes back for centuries, right? People have always had that kind of hunch, and turned out that, their particular intuition saved their life or something. So remote viewing really is just I feel it's a way to apply those kind of intuition, that psychic knowing, in a way that you can use it over and over again. That's really, I think, what it's designed to do.
Right. So some of these questions that I have for you tonight, I mean, I've used these questions before, but I think it's fair that I'm throwing them at you because I know you have a totally different opinion, and possibly different insight than my previous guests that I've had when we talked about this. But what's intuition from a remote viewer's definition? Is there a definition?
I don't know if there's anything official, but it is that information that you get in a remote viewing session, that intuition, comes from a level of consciousness below our waking consciousness. We've evolved, an ego that is used to basically helping us navigate our physical world. And it's very good at what it does, but it sort of gets in the way of remote viewing. And so the idea in doing remote viewing and bringing out that sort of psychic ability in you is to learn how to quiet that part of your mind. I think that you mentioned about interconnectedness earlier, about how everybody seems to be connected. There's part of that that's involved. I think there's some part of you already knows the answer. And your job really is to just get your waking mind, your ego, out of the way long enough for you to be able to just have that information soak in.
Fine tune it.
Yeah.
Right. You mentioned the word psychic, but as you said, everybody has some ability to do this. Do you think it's psychic, or do you think it's you don't have to be psychic, perhaps?
Paul Smith, right? Famous remote viewer from Stargate. He does lots of training, teaches controlled remote viewing, doesn't really consider himself a psychic.
Right.
He can remote view like the best of them. Obviously, he's done, thousands of targets, but he considers himself just an everyday person who, when he sits down with a pen and paper, can, pull up information like magic. But he just considers it to be just an everyday sort of skill. So you don't necessarily have to consider yourself psychic to be a good remote viewer.
So what about other disciplines like perhaps music and martial arts, where there seems to be this instinctual thing that comes to play? I mean, there's a lot of people out there who want to be musicians that'll never be musicians. Is it easier to tap into that creativity process or that psychic process with RV, or do you think it's harder than other disciplines that you could kind of parallel this to?
You got to walk a fine line, because when you're first starting out in remote viewing, and I honestly consider myself to be first starting out, I'm not an expert by any means, but there is a tension between your wanting to get the right information and getting that information, right? If you can't chase the information in remote viewing. And so it's a challenge to sort of back yourself up a little bit and learn how to let that information come to you. So that's kind of how I foresee it. And once again, I'm sorry, I've kind of lost the script here. The question, what was the actual question again?
Well, does it parallel other disciplines like music and martial arts in any way, as far as the learnability, the way that you pick up the information and apply that information?
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
We have prodigies, child prodigy musicians, right, who can sit there and play an entire, symphony on piano or whatever, and also martial artists that are really well. And what they have in common is the discipline, honestly. They are laser focused on getting better. If you want to be a champion, that's kind of what you have to be, right? So what a lot of people don't see is the hours of practice that prodigy has put in at the piano, or the martial artist has put in the dojo, just working on their moves. If you have that kind of focused discipline that you are just going to get this done, then that is going to be a big help to you. And not everybody is willing to do it. And this is where it comes back to the comments I made earlier, because it's a very fragile thing when you are opening yourself up to, I'm going to get this information. I have no idea where it's coming from. I don't know if I can validate it at all. You have to be just willing to put it down on paper and trust the process. And over time, if you're training in the dojo or you've been doing your exercises at the piano, you don't even think about it. This just stuff comes naturally. It's like muscle memory. And so if you get really good at remote viewing, you get that same kind of muscle memory, and it can overcome that fear. But that same dedication that'll make you an excellent pianist or a martial artist is going to go a long way in remote viewing.
Do you ever feel like you have a writer's block? You want to do it, but, you're afraid of failure, possibly. Who knows what causes writer's block? But, is there ever a time when you go to attempt this, that the creative process just isn't there because you're not in the right frame of mind?
Totally. Absolutely. It's happened to me before many times. And as I said, you have to learn how to not chase that information and just be open to it. And it is you're putting yourself out there. Like I said, it's a very fragile thing. If you've got somebody sitting across the table from you as your monitor and they need information, or if there's, somebody's safety on the line and you've got to pull this information out, you want to make them happy. But at the same time, you have to let that process just act. And the more you grip it and say, this is, I'm going to make this happen, the less likely you are to succeed. Some of the best remote viewers I know are completely not invested in the outcome. They just say, all right, I will do the best I can. And whether I hit the target or I don't, doesn't matter. And that's really the attitude that you need to be a successful remote viewer.
When I first started thinking about this and first started reading about it, the world was completely a different place. I would imagine the people who did this, whether they be hobbyists or if serious, work and research-minded people, what are people looking for now? Why are they doing it? If they're picking it up right now, or if they picked it up a year ago and they started learning the process, how's it changed over the last couple of years, 3 years, specifically? And, what's the general goal out there? What's the consensus of what they want to get out of the process?
Well, the reason I encourage people to learn remote viewing is that it offers you the ability to, do magic. Basically, you can travel to places that you can't get to physically. You can pull back this information. You can experience things just by sitting in a room. It is a way of exercising your mind and realizing that the boundaries that we normally accept don't really apply. And that includes not just space, but also time. You can go back in time and view things that happened in the past, and sometimes view things in the future as well. So it's a way of expanding horizons. And when I think back on that first workshop I had in 2006, I wouldn't change a thing. That you don't ever fit back in that same box once you realize that your mind has incredible power. And we are really just only scratching the surface on how to direct this. And remote viewing is a great step to do that, but there's still, so much to learn. Yeah.
So how powerful is it? Specifically, so this morning, quite a day for me starting out. I decided, and I could have done this a year ago, I could have done it 6 months ago, but I had to go to the DMV to get my license plates. So had to do it before work. I'm in line at 7:00 in the morning. It's 15 below zero outside. And, I want to find a happy place there, which is almost impossible at that time. But, as a remote viewer, is it possible to use this as a tool just to leave behind the situation or the place you're in right now to be and do something better?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great way to, I won't say fully disassociate, but when you're sitting there and you're in a session and you're focusing on the target that's been put in front of you, the idea is that part of your consciousness sort of reaches out to that area, and it might just be reaching for the data. Some people say that they actually go there. Again, I sort of have that impression that it's the idea that you're accessing, but it is kind of like a vacation. I know a lot of people that I interact with online, remote viewers, treat it as a vacation. If they have a target pool and they pull out one of some really interesting, cool place, once they sit down and they do that session, they do kind of have that feeling that at least part of them was there and experiencing that. So it absolutely can be an incredible break from your normal reality. And I tell you, some of the sessions, when you're done with them, if you have an outstanding session, it blows you away. You get the biggest rush. So that is a part that I'm always kind of chasing whenever I do a session, and I've had some good ones. But it is it really and the other thing I guess is when you practice remote viewing on a regular basis, it opens up your intuition and your psychic ability, and that appears in your everyday life, not just remote viewing. So you mentioned, driving around the parking lot, maybe trying to find the better space. Things like that will just start to happen for you. Anything you set an intention to in your mind might actually take place soon. You might get these flashes of intuition out of the blue. You might have some other interesting things happen. It can really unlock a lot of these abilities that you didn't know you had. And that happened to me like the first 2 weeks after I took my first remote viewing workshop. I was extraordinarily psychic, and all the kinds of really interesting things were happening during that period. So it can help in your everyday life, just making that connection, I guess, between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind.
Do you think that information is always out there and we just need to tap into it and we need to be open for the opportunity for that to present itself? Or
absolutely,
does it create that?
Yes.
Chicken egg.
Okay. The thing, the more you practice that link between your subconscious mind and your conscious mind, the stronger it gets, right? And remote viewing is very much like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. One thing that I suggest to people is becoming more aware of your dreams. Okay. I think that if you start keeping a dream journal and paying attention to your dreams, and if you learn how to lucid dream, especially, you can really strengthen that connection, because in a lucid dream, you are bringing your waking mind into your dreaming mind. And that, I think, the more often you do that, the stronger that connection is the other way around. So when you do remote viewing or you want intuition to play a role in your life, if you're familiar with that connection between the two parts of your consciousness, and you're familiar with your dream symbols, for instance, that really builds that connection. And then that intuition can really work for you during the day.
Is it just remote viewing, or can you manipulate or interact with objects and or other people?
Yes. I don't know. I think PK, the psychokinesis, the interacting with objects, isn't as directly related to remote viewing. Although I think it does unlock a little bit of your psychic ability in that regard. It's not directly related to it. Interacting with people, absolutely. I think that that you find yourself communicating with people on a psychic level or mental level in ways that you wouldn't ordinarily expect. So, I mean, that has happened to me. And people like Lynn Buchanan talk a lot about remote influencing and being able to get people to notice things or influence them, which I strongly believe is the case. I don't know if I've done it myself necessarily, but it can happen.
I like Lynn Buchanan a lot. I think he's a great voice. for this.
I think Lynn is like a human wizard. I think like he's that guy in the rumpled wizard suit with the pointy hat on who is really unassuming, but has a lot of magic under his belt or in his magic wand or whatever. So
or you could put him in full combat gear, and he's he can wear a few hats. I like
yes, he can. Yes, he can. Very interesting guy. So I did get a chance to meet him. I went to a remote viewing, I think the IRVA remote viewing conference of 2006, and spent a little time with Lynn. Super nice guy, and very, very quiet and unassuming, but he can work some magic. So
right.
Got some interesting stories.
What about the ability to circumnavigate time? Is there time travel, or can there be time travel involved?
There are cases where, and this did not happen to me, but there's a thing that happens to some viewers during sessions called bilocation. And this is basically where you forget that you're actually in the room doing remote viewing and find yourself actually in whatever situation that you were targeting. So if your target was Custer's last stand, for instance, you could be right in the middle of this battle, and it would be real as day. You would see, bullets flying by or arrows, and some of them would be flying through you, and it would take a little while to haul you back in, I guess, in certain occasions. So you can pick historical events and you can experience them as you were there. But you can also just get that information where you're grounded and you're in the room and you're just doing the session and just pull that data out rather than actually experience it. So yes, I mean, there's ways of doing that. In the future seems to be a little bit harder to predict. But there is a protocol in remote viewing that's designed to do that, called Associative remote viewing. And there are lots of remote viewers who are using this to predict like the rise and fall of cryptocurrency values or the outcomes of sporting events. There's a group that meets in Vegas every year that does remote viewing sessions on whatever sport happens to be in session or season that time. And I've gone to some of those and put some real money down on the outcomes, and I won. So
nice.
It's a lot of fun.
So when I mentioned circumnavigating time, I'm thinking about time travel. So when you're able to look back at the Civil War, is it because you're actually there and it's actually happening and you've actually circumnavigated time, or does the space-time have a memory that we're able to see? What's your opinion there? Because that's interesting. I think that's a big deal.
Yes, it is. It's a challenging question. And I asked Joe McMoneagle that during that first workshop. I said, tell me about time, because I realized after he was talking for a while that he had a completely different view of time. So he described time as, he said, most people think of time as a river that's just flowing by. And he said, I think of time more like a lake where I can just go in and experience various events anywhere I want. And I thought that is really kind of profound, So there are, I have my own personal opinion of time is that we're creating our past and our future all at once. And so you can sort of kind of pick and choose what path you want to take, the probabilities, I guess, that are out there. But it's kind of impossible to be where you're at and then try to change something in the past and not still be where you're at. You know what I mean? So you never really know if you change time. But if you pay attention to your intuition, for instance, and you have a precognitive moment that says, oh, I shouldn't walk out in the street at this particular time because a truck is going to come barreling down the street and hit me. And then you change your behavior and you don't walk out into the street, truck goes by, you're not hit. Did you change the future? Or, what happened? How come you saw that vision and the vision didn't come true, right? So I think it all depends on your point of view. And going back to the ARV session I mentioned when I was betting on the sporting event, that was a jaw-dropping moment for me. I'll tell you a little bit about the scenario. ARV is where you have a binary question that you want to answer. And rather than say, the Braves versus the Giants in a baseball game, where your mind would sort of jump in with its imagination. And so I see, feathers in a Chiefs hat or whatever. You hide those outcomes behind a remote viewing target. So you pick a picture of an apple for the Braves and you have a picture of a pencil for the Giants. And that's their target picture. And you tell the remote viewer, you say, okay, tell me what picture you're going to be shown at the end of the event. And the remote viewer goes and does the session. And if they happen to sketch something that looks like a pencil as opposed to an apple or, whatever else, the judge can look at that and say, okay, well, it looks like the Giants are going to win. And if it's a strong enough hit and the judge decides that it is, unlikely that that's just, way off the beaten path there, then you can put money on it and potentially win. So that happened to me. I did a baseball game where we were picking the over/under, like the number of runs or something. I guess I'm not a big gambler, but the idea was that the game would have less than 9 runs. Okay, whatever it is that's called. So I had a really strong remote viewing session right before that, and I didn't know the target. I didn't know anything about that, but my judge said, you know what? That's a really good result you had. So when I heard that, I went down to the bettors table. I put money down on it, and then I went up to my hotel room to watch the baseball game. And the very first inning, there were 8 runs. Very first inning. And if it went over 8, I was toast and
right.
My money was gone. But somehow it stayed at 8 runs for the entire game, and I won my money. And then I said, okay, I want to go see my feedback. So I went back to the judge, and he showed me the picture. And it was a picture, you might be familiar with this because I think you're in the Northwest. It was a picture of the Northern Lights, very much like what's in your background right now.
Right.
And I had drawn this dark landscape with this greenish sort of hue in the sky, very, very much like what's on your screen right now.
That's why I chose this. It came to me.
It must have. Yeah, that's really really prophetic there. So
usually I use the one you have, which I like much better. But there you go.
Okay, yeah, it makes it look like I'm studious with all my fake ones there.
Right.
Yeah, I understand. But that was it. It was the Northern Lights, and it was an absolute hit. And I put money on it, and I won. And that's kind of how you can view the future. Now, a lot of remote viewers try to do the same with the presidential election, right? Who's going to win, Trump or Clinton? There were lots of results on either side. And so you kind of wonder, like, how did some people get this so wrong? And I think it's because the future changes all the time. Just like not stepping out in the street when the truck is coming, you might change the future at any moment and decide that you're not going to do that. You're going to do something else. So it's hard to say, can you go back and experience time? I asked Paul Smith, I interviewed Paul Smith a couple months ago for the remote viewing group. And I said, can you interact with the past? Because I know that remote viewers have talked with historical figures in some of their sessions and had those figures give them those answers. And Paul was of the impression that you can't change the past. You can go back and you can experience it the way some people experience it, but you can't change it. And so I don't know. I don't think, honestly, anybody really knows the answer to that question. You can be there like you were involved in everything, but you're not really involved. Right. It's there's still a lot more research, I think, that needs to get done on this.
Yeah, for sure. Remote viewing it is in its purest form. If you were going to sit down and you were going to do a demonstration with somebody, and I've done this on the show, but describe how that works and just talk about, let's say, for example, you and I were going to do it and I'm going to set up a target. What does my part look like and what does your part look like?
Okay. Tasking is important. What you want to do is avoid, for at least the initial people who are just getting into remote viewing. If you just wanted to show somebody what a session is, you would probably pick a fairly tame target, not like some murder scene or anything that's emotionally upsetting or whatever, because you can pick up on those emotions very easily in remote viewing sessions. And And it's like the pure emotion too. Like I said, when you view and you're looking at that idea of something, there's no filter, right? It's basically just hitting you in the face. So, and sometimes literally hitting you in the face. But for initial target, you want to pick something that is fairly clear cut. So if it's a one photograph of a particular object, or you can easily see what the focus of the picture is. That's a good way of picking a target. You would, if this was a lab test, both of you would be blind to this. So you would put this in a double wrapped envelope in a pile of other pictures so that you don't know which one you're pulling out. And then you would hand it to the viewer and say, okay, your target number, and you'd read the target number off the envelope. Now the target number, the coordinates, are completely random. They do not really correspond with anything, but it's just a way for your, like a handle for your mind to grab onto for that particular target. So the envelope has a target written on it. You put it down in front of the viewer and say, your target number is blah. And then the viewer will take a page, close their eyes, try to clear their mind, settle their mind. And this is, again, where those really subtle images and thoughts and stuff come into your head. So if you are really good at meditating, if you're really good at quieting your mind and learning how to listen to those really faint, tiny voices and thoughts and things, then that is a really excellent exercise to sort of cultivate when you're doing remote viewing. But clear your mind. You don't necessarily have to close your eyes. Paul discourages people from closing their eyes. He won't stop you from doing it, but he kind of discourages you from doing it. But anyway, just kind of focus on that and say, set the intention. That's also important to say, I'm going to get this information. So write down the target number. Often you'll have these fleeting images come through your mind. And a way I like to describe this to people is imagine that you've got like a jigsaw puzzle that you're trying to put together, and you've got this cloth bag where all the pieces are. So remote viewing is very much like reaching into that bag and pulling out a piece and kind of looking at it, setting it down, pulling out another piece. And these pieces could be anywhere in your puzzle, right? You could be, way over here in one corner or the other, or the middle or the edges or whatever, but you don't know what the picture looks like until you get enough of these pieces out of the bag. So you're kind of going fishing when you're remote viewing to pull out one little piece of the puzzle, set it down, pull out the next one, and try your hardest not to try to put the puzzle together until you've got all the pieces out. Okay, that's the idea of like your left brain, right brain separation. Your left brain is going to try to solve the puzzle before it's done, and the right brain is still getting that information. And if it's a really fine balance that you're trying to strike here, but you try to keep that left brain quiet. Try not to name things. Try to just let that information come out of your right brain as you work there. And if you get like sketches or images, you want to sketch those images. They call it remote viewing, but it's not just the visual stuff. It's hearing. You can hear sounds. You can taste things. You can feel textures. You get an emotional impact from some targets. You can feel like if the target is the top of the Empire State Building, you might suddenly feel vertigo, and you might have to write that down. I feel vertigo. But you take you can usually do a simple 3-stage session in about 30 minutes. Write all that stuff down, and at the end of it, then you can kind of look at the data you've collected and make a guess about what it is that you were looking at. At that point, the person across the table will usually give you your feedback, open up the envelope, show you whatever photograph it was that you were working on. And that's kind of a simple session.
In your opinion, do you think the government is still engaged in remote viewing? And do you think they continue to pursue that?
Well,
should they? Two questions.
I think there's a 50-50 chance, personally, a 50-50 chance that this is happening. The reason it was closed is a lot of pushback from, I think, fundamentalist evangelicals that were high in the government and were very uncomfortable with the thought of people using their mental powers to do things that they couldn't explain. I don't think that particular problem has gone away. I think it's honestly gotten worse, right? So I would be highly skeptical that there would be something like this going on with these particular type of people still in charge. On the other hand, I've worked in intelligence myself. I was in the Navy as an enlisted cryptologic technician, and I know that we don't tend to decommission assets until we have a replacement asset to take its place, right? And one example is the U-2 spy plane. When it went away, we had the SR-71 to take its place, and there might be something now, like a particular drone or something that's taking the place of the Blackbird. So I give it 50-50. I don't think the government is directly involved in remote viewing, but I would not at all be surprised if these particular agencies were farming this out to civilian contractors on occasion.
So here's a question that I never thought about. If remote viewing was a big part of military research, and you said it could be replaced by something, what would be next? I mean, wow. I mean, remote viewing is a big deal. So, what's around the bend? The U.S. military, I wonder. Any scuttlebutt? Have you heard anything? That's the big question.
I don't know if I have. I think some research has been done in out-of-body experiences. I think some of that took place at the Moreau Institute, where they have programs that tend to make that easy. I think Joe McMoneagle is fairly good at doing out-of-body experiences, but there are some problems with that. If you find your full consciousness at a particular site, it's very challenging for you to report back in real time what's happening. So there are some things that make that less than ideal. And remote viewing is a way of kind of splitting your consciousness. So part of your mind goes out and gets that data, and the other part is still sitting there recording it. And that's very useful. There could be some experiments underway where they try to make like an out-of-body experience event more useful from an intelligence point of view. I don't know. I do know, and this also came up with my recent conversation with Paul, I do know there's a lot we still don't know about remote viewing. There are a lot of opportunities for research. And the money that the government put into the Stargate program was really a drop in the bucket. I mean, honestly, you can buy like a third of a fighter plane for the full 20-year budget that they had for the Stargate program. There's not a lot of money going into research right now, and there's still so many questions. I think we know just a little bit about how it works, and I think the potential is enormous. So if somebody somewhere found the money to invest in research, I think that there'd be some enormous breakthroughs coming through it. But I don't know of anybody doing that right now, to be honest.
Yeah. Interesting to think
Sad.
about, though. How is remote viewing accurately statistically measured, and is that important? Meaning that there seemingly must be much data collected by the military, and there must be because it's a military thing to collect data. So is there a way to quantify the data and provide a statistic on how effective remote viewing can be as a practical application?
Yes, I mean, Dr. Jessica Utz was hired in the 1995 or so to audit the Stargate program at its when it was handed over to the CIA, and has the statistics to prove that remote viewing is far beyond chance. I think some of the statistics that have been bandied about, maybe by folks like Lynn, were that 33 to 50% of the time, I think they had actionable intelligence that they pulled out of remote viewing. And that might not sound like hitting a home run every time, but then again, if you're batting 300, then you're an excellent ball player, right? And when you compare the success of the remote viewing program to other intelligence assets like satellite imagery or human intelligence, that is not always accurate either. And so when you put those different combinations of different channels of intelligence together, you can get a much better picture. Now, there are things that remote viewing we're able to discover that could not be provided by satellites or spies on the ground. And so it provided sort of a unique angle to that. Statistically, it has been proven that it works. And I can refer you to some of the papers that Dr. Utz has written, I guess, in order to go over that. Also, I think some audits by Dr. Edwin May, who took over the program in the 80s. He has a lot of that scientific statistical data as well.
Interesting. I have a listener, and he's also been on the show. His name's David Powell. And I asked, a while back, I asked if he had any good questions for Lynn, and he did. So I want to ask you a couple of these same questions because it's very interesting. So the first one he sent to me, and this has been a while ago, when you're remote viewing future events with the idea of quantum entanglement and the double slit theory, do you believe we could be possibly changing future events just by looking at them? That's the deepest one. That was the first one he asked, and that's the biggie.
And it's a good question. I'd honestly love to hear what Lynn has to say about that. But my opinion is kind of goes back to what I was saying, where we change the future. I think that double split experiment, as spooky as it is, we are choosing what happens there when we are looking at it. It's reacting to that. And it's kind of a good hint that that reality is fluid. You touched a little bit on like objects, being able to manipulate objects, PK, right? Psychokinesis.
Right.
And we do a little of this every time psychics get together for things like remote viewing conferences or whatnot. Usually some of the after parties will have a spoon bending party. And I've done spoon bending for a few times. It was really frustrating the first couple of times I tried it, because I was in a room and watching all these people bend silverware, and I thought, well, they must know some kind of trick. But there would be an occasion where eventually it would happen to me. And what I was told is that, and I'm going somewhere with this, what I was told is that the spoon has to tell you when it's ready to bend. Let me look, actually. I think I've got one of the spoons that I've got right here that I can show you. The spoon tells you when it's ready to bend. And I didn't really understand that until it happened. And I was standing around with a spoon in my hands. And I don't know if you could see this with my fake background.
It's got to be in front of your shirt there. Yeah.
Yeah, in my shirt. I'll put it in front of my face. There we go. You can kind of see it. All of a sudden, reality changed for me in the room in a weird way. It wasn't just the spoon changing, but something about my consciousness changed too. Like all of a sudden, I just knew that this spoon was going to bend. Mm-hmm. And it did. And it was like an instant that the room changed. And the point I'm trying to make here in regards to your question is that reality is fluid. And I think that if you are in a room where consensus reality all of a sudden says, yeah, you can bend spoons, then you can bend spoons. I think that we can change the rules that we play by. I think that if more people learn remote viewing and realize that there are holes in time and space that we really weren't familiar with before, I think that fundamentally it changes the reality that everyone is going to experience in their day-to-day lives. Very much like that first couple of weeks after I learned how to remote view, I was doing things I did not think were possible, and they are possible. And you sort of take those brakes off when you do this. So my point is that reality, I think, is honestly up to us. You know, I think Richard Bach, the author of Jonathan Livingston Seagull, has a great quote. He says, "Argue for your limitations, and sure enough, they're yours." And I think a lot of that applies to some of the things you discover when you start playing around with reality. You realize that things are not as set in stone as you might have thought they were.
Right.
Yeah.
Another Dave question. Do you believe when we are remote viewing that we are connecting to a signal from some kind of quantum network, or does our subconscious mind already have all the data and we are accessing it from there? Yeah, exactly. Or could these two things be one and the same?
Probably one and the same. I always get a little nervous when somebody compares like psychic ability or remote viewing to quantum mechanics, because I don't have a physics background, and I'm not at all qualified to talk about that. Hal Puthoff can do it because he has a physics background and a doctorate in it. So I'm going to let him. I've heard him mention quantum stuff with remote viewing and psychic ability. For me, I don't necessarily feel comfortable going there, but I do think that that you were looking at that idea, you're looking at that consciousness, the thought of a particular thing, and I think that changes all the time. It's like that observer experiment you're talking about, the double slit. You cannot think of something without changing it. You cannot experience something without changing it. And I think that that kind of goes against what Paul was saying about not being able to change the past. I think if you are able to witness the Battle of Wounded Knee or Custer's Last Stand, you are in effect changing it, very much like the double slit experiment. Yeah. So that's kind of how I would extend David's question.
Of all the things, let me go this way. Of all the otherworldly beings that you have bumped into during remote viewing, did any of them ever creep you out, and why?
Well, I'm more of a beginner remote viewer and have not been tasked with those kinds of events. I've had some personal experiences with them, and I don't know if they would necessarily. Well, I guess I would have to say I was creeped out. I'm not going to be brave about it, but I've not done any of those esoteric targets in general. But some of the things I've heard are eyebrow raising. Some of my friends who have done those targets. So yes, I mean, the things that I've heard mentioned are a little bit freaky. Some of those things I wish weren't actually true. So
right. Some remote viewers have claimed to have been visited by ETs after remote viewing. Have you had that experience? Have you talked about it with anybody?
I've had ETs visit. I don't know if it was necessarily due to remote viewing, but I think that they're very psychically tuned in, and I think that if you are working on your intuition, if you're open-minded and starting to pay attention to that part of your mind that has been dormant for a lot of people, I think that that they notice, honestly. And I know you'll talk with a lot of remote viewers who do have direct ET experience. I know several remote viewers who have experienced ETs and UFOs and the like. And the question that I'm still trying to figure out is it a chicken or egg, right? Is it that remote viewing is bringing the ETs, or is it their experience with ETs is encouraging the remote viewing learning? I don't know, honestly. That's something that I'm still pondering.
Or they tend to
go together.
Yeah, and they kind of may delve and dive into that realm themselves, and we just cross paths from time to time.
Yeah, I think that.
Or another way of crossing paths.
I think they're far more mental and psychically developed than we are, and I think that they are encouraged by us learning how to interact in that realm. When I did a separate training with Angela Thompson-Smith a couple of years ago, it was a week-long training, and the whole time I was in remote viewing training, I felt that there were there was a presence around. I think it might have been ET. I think that they were very happy to see me doing what I was doing. And encouraging that in a weird way that I can't really explain. I didn't see anything necessarily, but I definitely felt stuff. Actually, I did see some things, to be honest with you. Fourth day, we were out on the beach, and we took a little break from the remote viewing, and my classmates and I were just hanging out on the beach, and we thought, just for fun, we'll see if we can mentally call to the dolphins and see if any dolphins can come up and see us.
That's cool.
So we were sitting out there watching the waves and looking for any fins or whatever, and looking for dolphins. And all of a sudden, the beach got just extraordinarily cold. The temperature dropped like 15, 20 degrees all of a sudden. And I'm shivering, and everybody else is shivering. And we decided that it was late and we needed to go in. At that point, I think I saw a little fuzzy white orb shoot up from the beach near my friend Angela. And I asked everybody, did you see that? And nobody else had seen it. So I thought, okay, something really weird is going on here. So we walked back up to the road off the beach, and maybe 30 feet or so beyond where we went, all of a sudden it was warm again, just like that. And I thought that was really odd. So, I mean, you hear sometimes stories from UFO observers or whatever that talk about how the temperature just changes wildly. But that was really neat. We never saw any dolphins, but
no flipper sighting.
No flipper. I don't think it was flipper that was floating around there, but something was definitely around. So
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that struck me today, I was reading the news, and while I was thinking about doing this show, there was an article about a new type of seafood farming, and it was octopus farming. I don't know if you stumbled upon that, but
no, I don't know about this.
You know, it really alluded, and without actually making this claim, alluded to the fact that octopus are like way too smart to farm. They're just too smart, and it's too problematic. And to me, it sounded like scientists who know a lot about that species were afraid of afraid of the actual thought of octopus farming and the implications, because the animal's just too smart. And you know, you brought up dolphins. We have a whole aquatic realm out there full of unbelievable brains, and there's other fish too that are incredibly smart. And I'm not talking about just whales and octopus, but other things in there as well. So you know, that's one resource that we have that we haven't really tapped into. Obviously, the military has messed around with some of our aquatic creatures and dolphins and different types of whales, and who knows how they've used those in the past. And I don't even want to think about that. But you know, that's just another creature that, and another part of the world that we know very, very little about. You know, so having said that, and kind of this convoluted questioning that I always have, what's next for you? I mean, are you going to pursue this deeper and hopefully become much, much better at this craft, or have you reached the peak and you want to try something else?
Yes, I want to learn more. I want to practice more. I want to expand beyond remote viewing and do other things. I've decided that I was going to learn more about PK this year, because I find that fascinating, and the stories that I've heard and things I've seen, things I've done myself with the spoon, for instance, tell me that there's a lot of potential there. So there's a guy, Joe Gallenberger, Dr. Joe Gallenberger, who's a psychologist and teaches a course on PK. He takes people out to Las Vegas on a regular basis, where they take over a craps table, and he claims that he can will the dice to land any way he wants and teach people how to do this. And that is fascinating. And, you know, some of this stuff can be done in a lab.
And lucrative.
It could be lucrative. I don't know how much money is involved in a lot of this stuff. You know, if you're betting on things like Bitcoin or on horse races and things like that, yes, using your remote viewing for gambling, you could probably make a decent amount of money. But I don't know if just doing straight remote viewing is a very lucrative sort of thing, at least at this point. But there are also a lot of people, and this is the age-old question: is that if you're psychic, is it right to use that ability to make money? And a lot of people shy away from that, thinking, well, it's a gift, you know, I really shouldn't apply it to to money and cheapen it by, you know, trying to make a living from it. But on the other hand, you know, if you've got other talents, like you're a really good painter or you play piano or whatever, do you have the same kind of moral dilemma of, you know, writing music or painting something? Is that somehow wrong? If you've got a talent, you should be able to use it any way you want. So if you choose to make a living from remote viewing, I don't have any issues with it. And I wish more people had that kind of need for remote viewers. But as you said, I think a lot of people just don't know about it. And to be honest, I started talking about this on Twitter, remote viewing a couple months ago, like seriously discussing things. And I'm still honestly just flabbergasted at how many people have never heard of remote viewing,
right,
and don't know anything about it, because it was just all over the airwaves back in the 90s.
mm-hmm.
And more people need to sort of let people know about it, because there's so many practical uses for it, and it could solve so many problems that, I'm happy to help move the ball forward any way I can on this, to be honest. And that's why I'm here,
So we got like 1 minute. So explain where people are going to go to find out information. Where's Remote Viewing 101 online?
Yeah, the best source of like basic remote viewing is the International Remote Viewing Association. That's irva.org. And you can learn a little bit about it. You can do some simple exercises. You can read their materials. Daz Smith, his 8 Martinis website, has wonderful free newsletters that cover remote viewing. Facebook has lots of groups. Reddit has a remote viewing group that's really good. Lots of resources out there, and feel free to ask questions and try it yourself. I mean, this is something you can just do at your kitchen table anytime you want. So get cracking.
Excellent. Mark Turner is a veteran of the United States Navy. Thanks, by the way, Mark. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Very honorable work there. He served aboard the USS Elliot during the Persian Gulf War. Mark was granted a top secret security clearance and also performed duties as an intelligence photographer. Mark Turner is also a remote viewer, and you can find Mark on Facebook as well as his website, markturner.net. Mark Turner, thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You can find my website at www.myalienlifepodcast.com, and please subscribe to my latest downloads at iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and at podbean.com. And please follow me and like me on Facebook and Twitter. My Alien Life is written and produced for broadcast at Studio 254 in the Northern Rocky Mountains. The music you are hearing is produced and created by ELEON. You can find all ELEON's work online at Heart Dance Records.